Get ready for terrifying witch stories that will make you think twice before stepping into certain places, like the one you're about to hear, where two kids get lost in the woods and end up in the hands of a witch planning a dark ritual. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any chilling stories, and let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. The sky hung heavy that afternoon, thick with clouds, and the air carried a strange burnt smell, like something had been scorched miles away. My little sister Lily and I were playing near the edge of the woods, ignoring all the warnings the old-timers gave about that place. We'd heard the stories 100 times, whispers calling kids by name, shadows moving on their own, something unseen lurking in the trees when the sun dipped low. But we were stubborn kids. We figured it was all just campfire tales meant to scare us into behaving. The ground was still damp from last night's rain, and wet leaves clung to the soles of my sneakers. Lily laughed, swiping at me with a thin branch like it was a sword. I dodged, sprinting ahead until I realized we'd gone way farther from home than we meant to. The distant hum of the highway faded, replaced by nothing but our footsteps and the muffled chirps of birds. Then I noticed it. The air got colder. The wind picked up, but the trees around us didn't so much as rustle. It was like the whole forest had stopped breathing. I froze, listening. A sharp crack echoed from deeper in the woods, like a foot stepping on a dry branch. Lily's head snapped up. She'd heard it too. We stood there silent until the wind returned with a long, eerie whistle winding through the trees. "Just the wind," I muttered, trying to convince myself more than her. We kept walking, but the dirt path we'd followed was gone. I turned back, only to find the forest different, like the trees had shifted while we weren't looking. The hair on my neck stood up. That feeling of being watched? It wasn't just in my head. On instinct, I grabbed Lily's hand. We wandered, directionless, until a voice cut through the silence. "Lost, are we?" We spun around. A woman stood a few yards away, wrapped in a dark shawl that hid half her face. Her skin was pale, too pale, and her eyes were so dark they looked like empty pits. "My home's just ahead," she said, her smile never quite reaching those eyes. "You can rest, have some water." Lily glanced at me, waiting. Every instinct screamed wrong. The way she'd appeared out of nowhere, no footsteps. The way the shadows clung to her like they were part of her. But we were tired, and cold water sounded like heaven. "Yeah, we're lost," I admitted, already regretting it. She moved closer, slow, like she didn't want to spook us. She smelled strange, dried herbs and smoke, and her bare feet made no sound on the dirt. We followed her down a narrow trail I swear hadn't been there before. With every step, the forest grew quieter, the late afternoon light fading too fast. Then we saw it. A crooked wooden house, dark and sagging, with tiny windows like hollow eyes. No smoke rose from the chimney, but it had the stale, heavy feel of a place that had been lived in for too long. She pushed the door open. Inside, candlelight flickered, and the herb smell was stronger. Glass jars lined the shelves, filled with colored liquids and things I didn't recognize. A small cauldron sat cold on a wood stove. "Sit, dears," she murmured. "I'll fetch you water." She vanished through a back door. Lily's grip on my arm tightened. The air in here was thick, like it was pressing down on us. I whispered that we should go, but before she could answer, the woman returned with 2 cups. The liquid inside wasn't water. It was yellowish, sickly sweet. "Drink," she urged, watching us too closely. "It'll calm you." I faked a sip, just wetting my lips. Lily did the same. The woman's smile twisted, and she led us down a narrow hall. The walls were scratched with symbols, charcoal or something darker, like eyes staring back. She opened a door. Inside was a small room, a boarded-up window, an iron bed frame. The moment we stepped in, we heard the click of a lock turning. My heart hammered. Lily's eyes were wide, tears welling. We threw ourselves at the door, but it wouldn't budge. Outside, the woman's footsteps faded until there was only our ragged breathing and the creak of the old house settling. Then we heard it, a low chant coming from somewhere nearby. Her voice blended with another, deep, guttural, like 2 people reciting something in a language that wasn't right. The air grew heavier with each repetition, like something bad was coming. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew this wasn't ending well. The chanting grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards. The walls trembled slightly, like something was moving underneath us. The slivers of light beneath the door flickered, casting shadows that slithered across the floor. Lily and I pressed against the wall, but the feeling of being watched only got worse, like something invisible was in there with us. I yanked at the lock, useless. Then we heard footsteps in the hall, slow, deliberate, like she wanted us to know she was coming. The key turned again and the door cracked open just enough for her to peer in. Her eyes were darker now, almost black, and she held a plate covered with a cloth. "Almost time," she whispered. Her smile made my blood turn to ice. She stepped inside, set the plate on the bed, and started reciting something fast and guttural. A cold draft swept through the room, though the window was sealed shut. Lily's fingers dug into my arm, her whole body shaking. Then we heard him, Dad's voice outside, shouting our names. I screamed back. The woman's head snapped up like she hadn't expected that. She lunged for the door, locked it again, and her chanting turned frantic. The smell of burning herbs filled the room, and the shadows on the walls moved, writhing like living things. We kicked, pounded, screamed. Seconds later, the door burst open. Dad stood there, wild-eyed, and yanked us out. The woman was frozen in the hallway, staring, her lips still moving like she was cursing us. Dad pressed a machete against her throat, a silent threat. "Follow us and I'll end you." She just smiled, unafraid, like she already had. We ran. Within minutes, we were back at the road like the forest had spit us out. When I looked back, the house was gone, just trees, endless trees. Mom cried when we got home, holding us like she'd never let go. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the hollow stare, the slow movement of her lips. Lily swore she could still smell the herbs, like they'd soaked into her skin. After that, we were never allowed out alone again. Years later, I still feel like we didn't really escape. Sometimes in the dead of night I hear it, a faint, distant chanting drifting from the woods, like she's still calling. Creepy, right? What did you think of that story? On a scale from 0 to 10, what would you rate it? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. If witches could lure children into a ritual, just imagine what could be hiding inside your own home. Like in the next story, where a family discovered their new house was hiding something far more sinister than just old walls. The first time I set foot in that house on Glenwood Drive, the air felt wrong. Not just the smell of old wood or the groan of the floorboards. It was like something was watching, measuring every step I took. My family and I had moved in out of sheer desperation. After months of scraping by, that place was the only one we could afford. From the outside, it looked almost charming. Overgrown yard, peeling paint, the kind of house that whispered, "Fixer-upper." But inside, something was off. At first, we told ourselves it was all in our heads. Then the weird stuff started. At night, we'd hear light footsteps in the hallway, like a cat padding back and forth. Except we didn't have a cat. Sometimes it came with a soft scratching right outside the bedroom door. I'd get up, throw it open, and there'd be nothing. The silence after was almost worse than the noise itself. Then came the blankets. It was like someone was yanking them off us while we slept. I'd wake up freezing. The comforter pooled on the floor, yards from the bed. My kids started complaining about something moving in their beds, like someone sitting at the foot, pressing down. The fear crept in slow, until we all ended up piled into one room just to feel safe. One night as I tucked the kids in, I noticed a strange glow coming from the closet. I opened the door and for a split second, I saw 2 red dots in the back, like eyes catching the light. I blinked, and they were gone. But that feeling, like something was standing right behind me, didn't fade. I slammed the door shut, pretending I hadn't seen a thing. Didn't want to scare the kids, or myself. The next few days brought new signs. Dark smudges started appearing on the wall near the kitchen. When I touched them, they weren't mold. They were hair. Long, black strands like they'd grown out of the wall. My skin crawled. I cut them away, scrubbed the spot clean, but by morning, they were back. More of them. The house felt alive, like it was exhaling something. The scariest thing yet happened when my sister-in-law stayed over. She slept in the guest room, and around 3 a.m. she woke up screaming. We ran in and found her on the floor, clutching her ankle, sobbing. She swore something had grabbed her leg from under the bed and yanked hard. We checked. Nothing there. But the red marks on her ankle? Deep, like fingers dug into her skin. Weeks passed, and the figures started appearing. Human-shaped shadows gliding down the hall, vanishing into the walls. Once I saw one standing in the living room doorway. Tall, thin, faceless. I froze until it just dissolved. The air in that house got heavier, like the walls themselves were pressing down on us. That's when we learned its history. An old neighbor, seeing me stare at the basement window, sidled up and lowered his voice. Years back, a man hanged himself down there. No one knew why, but rumors swirled. Some said he was troubled. Others claimed he was tied to a witchcraft circle that met on the darkest nights. The story hit me hard because the basement always gave me the creeps. The air was colder down there, metallic, like old blood. We tried to tough it out. Rearranged rooms, left lights on, even hung crosses on the doors. But nothing worked. The house kept testing us. One night, my daughter woke up crying. She'd seen a woman in the corner of her room, hair covering her face, pale hands pointing at her. Another time, my husband swore someone was sitting in his recliner. He flipped on the light. Nothing. Just that suffocating sense of being watched. Talking to neighbors only made it worse. Most avoided our house after dark. One woman told me her grandma used to say the place was a meeting spot for rituals. Women in cloaks, wooden boxes, animals going missing afterward. No one knew for sure what happened inside, but the rumor was that the house held a kind of evil that never left. We held on as long as we could. Then things got worse. The shadows that used to just pass by started lingering. I'd walk through the kitchen and feel icy breath on my neck, that prickling certainty that something was right behind me. One night I woke to footsteps on the stairs. My husband was still asleep, the kids were in the next room. I crept into the hallway and saw her, a woman-shaped figure at the bottom of the stairs, motionless, staring, no face, just presence. I blinked, and she was gone. But a trail of black hair was scattered on the last step, like she'd just walked through. The final straw came on a stormy night. We were all asleep when a crash shook the house. We ran to the basement and found the door swinging open, cold air pouring out. We shone a flashlight down the steps, and there it was, a thick rope hanging from the beams, swaying on its own. Wet, like it had just been used. My stomach dropped. The story of the hanged man flashed through my mind. In that moment, I knew we weren't welcome here. After that, the house felt alive and angry. Walls groaned like something was moving inside them. Doors slammed shut with no wind. Mirrors fogged up on their own, revealing handprints pressed against the glass from the other side. The kids refused to be alone, even in daylight. We finally called a local pastor to bless the place. He walked in, dead serious, barely speaking, but his eyes said he knew. He moved through the rooms, sprinkling holy water until he stopped in the master bedroom. Closed his eyes, whispered that there was something ancient here, tied to dark rituals. Not just a lost soul, something called that never got sent back. During the blessing, the house fought. Lights flickered. A crash came from the attic. The pastor raised his voice, commanding whatever was there to leave. I felt cold slither up my legs, like something was trying to push through me to escape. The kids were crying. My husband was shaking. When it was over, the pastor said the house felt lighter, but told us to get out as soon as we could. We didn't need to be told twice. Sold it fast, though no one in town wanted it. Years later, I still drive past Glenwood Drive sometimes. The house is still there, looking almost normal. But everyone knows what's inside. No one stays long. Some say they hear footsteps at night. Others claim to see red eyes glowing in the upstairs window. I don't need to hear the stories. I lived it. And I know one thing for sure. Whatever's in that house, it was never really gone. Scary, huh? That family managed to get rid of the house. But what happens when the evil is tied to a person, not a place? The story you're about to hear is about a woman feared by her entire village, accused of selling her soul to a demon. In my hometown, everybody knew that house. You couldn't walk past it without feeling your skin crawl, like something inside was watching your every step. The walls, choked with dark vines, seemed to breathe on their own. The small windows, always cracked open, had heavy curtains that swayed even when the air was still. And the iron gate, oh, that gate groaned like a dying man's last sigh. My grandma lived just down the street, and I grew up hearing stories about the woman who lived there. She wasn't just some eccentric neighbor. People swore she was the real deal. A witch. Not the kind you joke about at harvest festivals, but the kind with proof. Too many strange things happened around her for it all to be coincidence. And the worst part? Half the stories had witnesses. The oldest tales said that decades ago she was seen walking alone into the woods on a new moon night. No one knows who followed her, but some claimed they watched from the trees. A ring of stones, black candles burning with unnaturally steady flames, symbols carved into the earth like fresh wounds. They said she traded her soul for something forbidden, immortality. But there was a catch, and this was the part that made it all even darker. She could only die if she passed her duties to someone else. That explained, according to the old-timers, why she never aged like the rest of us. Her body changed too slowly, but her eyes grew sharper over time, like something ancient was staring out from behind them, watching the world with endless patience. The most unsettling detail? She'd tell anyone brave enough to ask that she had a servant. Not a human one, a demon. She never described it, but townsfolk swore they heard things in her backyard at night. Heavy footsteps like chains being dragged, or something massive walking through the grass. Sometimes it sounded like someone digging deep holes. And yet by morning, the ground was always smooth. No disturbed dirt, no marks. Despite the fear, people still went to her. And not for love potions or silly fortune-telling. They went out of need, out of desperation. Folks who'd been robbed, betrayed, or sick with no cure in sight. Those who dared knock on that rusted gate rarely left empty-handed. I remember one story that spread like wildfire. A woman had her life savings, money she'd been saving for her wedding, stolen. Days after visiting the witch, the cash reappeared in her home, wrapped exactly as it had been before. No one ever found out who returned it. Then there was the darker case, the one people still talk about in hushed tones. A young woman in love with a married man went to the witch to fix things. Months later, his wife dropped dead so suddenly even the town doctor was stumped. The man and the young woman married soon after, but she never seemed truly happy. It was like she carried an invisible weight, like she was always afraid of something the rest of us couldn't see. The witch's daughters had fled to Bucharest years before. Some said it was to escape their mother's influence. Others believed they were running from him, the demonic servant. Since then, the old woman lived alone, or so it seemed, because that house was never quiet. Late at night, I'd wake up at my grandma's with that suffocating feeling of being watched. Like something dark had crossed the street and was standing just outside the door. Grandma always told me not to look out the window. "What comes from there doesn't like to be seen," she'd say. And I listened, because even without looking, I could feel it. That presence had a weight like it was pressing down on the air itself. The creepiest part? No one knew if she was even still alive. Sometimes there'd be no movement in the house for weeks. The curtains didn't stir, the gate didn't creak. But then, out of nowhere, she'd appear on the porch, sitting in a wooden rocking chair, watching the street. And every time she reappeared, she looked exactly the same as the last time anyone had seen her. A few folks claimed that sometimes she seemed frail, hunched over, only to look years younger days later. The legends grew, fed by the town's collective fear. Some believed she was still making deals to renew her power. Others said she was searching for someone to take her curse, someone willing to accept a gift that came with a damnation. The whole town would tense up when a stranger moved in. There was always that unspoken question. Would she choose them? I remember one night in particular when a new couple walked past her house. They smiled politely, but the old woman just stared, motionless, until they disappeared around the corner. Not long after, the couple packed up and left without a word. Years have passed, and my grandma's street looks almost the same. But that house? It's still there. The iron gate still groans. The vines still choke the walls. The heavy curtains still sway on their own. Every time I visit Grandma, I walk past it fast. Even as an adult, even knowing better, I can't stop the chill down my spine. It's like that story never really ended. It's just waiting for the right moment to start again. And deep down, I think we all know, when that moment comes, there'll be no stopping it. Unreal, right? And even if you don't believe in deals with the devil, it's hard to ignore when things start happening right in front of your eyes. Just like in the next story, where an entire house seemed to breathe and react to anyone daring to step inside. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying these stories. So go ahead and hit that like button. It lets YouTube know you want more content like this, and it makes sure you never miss another horror story. The flickering light wasn't a short circuit. Someone or something was letting me know they saw me. I realized this the exact second the living room bulb crackled 3 times in a row, and the house held its breath right along with me. Out in Snyder County, when the sun drops, the road vanishes into the black mouth of the woods, and folks lock their doors early. But our house, it stays wide awake, like there's a heartbeat thrumming beneath the floorboards, pumping something foul through every wall. It's an old 2-story with a low-ceilinged basement, damp stone walls, and the metallic tang of rust in the air. Downstairs, the living room bleeds into the kitchen through a wide archway. You can see the sink, the stove, the sideboard scarred by glasses from other people's lives. Beside the fridge, a white door leads down to the cellar. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms line a long hallway. My parents' at the far end, the guest room facing the road, and mine in the middle, where I hear everything. I know each creak, each groan of the floorboards like escape routes memorized by muscle. Not because I'm paranoid, because some instincts run deeper than fear. The house's history was never a total secret, but no one ever spelled it out either. The realtor called it unusual activity, and the last family moved out fast. My parents laughed it off. Small-town gossip, they said. I played along until the afternoon my dad busted open a rusted padlock in the back of the basement. Behind the door, a windowless room, a bare bulb dangling from a wire, and in the center, a bench with an old Ouija board splayed across it. The walls were scrawled with symbols, circles etched with rune-like marks, crude eyes, splayed hands, a triangle of twine nailed into the plaster. Wax dripped in jagged pools on the floorboards. This wasn't a game. The second I stepped inside, I felt it. Something measuring me from the inside out. The neighbors didn't help. 2 grown brothers who fought over everything. Fence lines, parking spots, music blasting at 3 a.m., voices raw with curses. At first, I blamed them for the noises bleeding through the walls. Footsteps when everyone was asleep, rhythmic knocking, furniture dragging across the floor. It was the easy explanation. But easy doesn't last long in a house that watches back. The night that rewired our reality, my parents went out to dinner, leaving me with our 2 dogs. I was in my room, phone in hand, when I heard metal clatter against metal in the kitchen. I got up, called the dogs, and the lights started flickering, slow at first, then frantic. I set foot on the first stair and the kitchen noise stopped. Instead, heavy footsteps thudded upstairs, moving straight toward my bedroom. I backed up to the living room couch, angling myself to see both the hallway and the cellar door. The dogs bristled, low growls rumbling in their throats. The feeling of being watched settled over my skin like a shadow. Then came the dragging. Wood against wood, slow and deliberate, like someone pushing a dresser with cruel patience. It started in my parents' room, crossed the hallway, and stopped at the top of the stairs. I called my mom, forcing my voice steady, and told her to come home. As I talked, 3 sharp knocks rattled the white cellar door, hard enough to make the oval glass pane shudder. The dogs barked like they'd cornered an intruder. The TV flared to static on its own. I didn't blink. The second my parents' car pulled into the driveway, everything cut out. The lights steadied, the dogs relaxed, the air turned ordinary again. My mom said I was imagining things. My dad offered to check the wiring. I looked at them and knew it wasn't skepticism. It was protection. But the next day, the messages started. Silverware lined up on the kitchen floor, pointing toward the cellar door like arrows. My bedroom window cracked open in the dead of night. The hallway light flickered when someone said "basement" out loud. The house didn't want a conversation. It wanted an audience. One rainy afternoon, we went downstairs to sort through boxes. We passed the locked room, now ajar. The air in there was wrong, thicker, colder, like breathing through wet cloth. A woman's whisper slithered from the back, deep and distant, as if filtered through water. My dad asked if someone was there. The answer came as slow, deliberate scratches, 3 times on the wood. We left without another word. That night, a neighbor screamed, "Basement witch," mid-fight. The next day, he flagged me down by my last name and asked if the lady from the road liked the new tenants. I asked what he knew. He said the old owner held circles down there. Talked to the dead with that board. I swallowed hard and let it drop. I decided to face the cellar alone. I turned on every light downstairs, left the TV murmuring, and descended with my phone flashlight. The dogs followed me 2 steps down, then froze. In the symbol room, the Ouija planchette rested on the bench, its pointer hovering over the letter G. The twine triangle still hung on the wall. The wax stains formed a lopsided circle. The silence had weight. It smelled like burnt sage and damp cloth. A cold breath brushed my ear, and an unseen will pressed down. "Sit." I sat, without touching anything. I whispered, "What do you want?" The planchette slid on its own. M, paused. O, then M, Mom. My stomach lurched. The stairway bulb flashed on and off. The dogs howled upstairs. Footsteps pounded across the ceiling above the cellar. I bolted up. The door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the hinges. 3 knocks answered from the other side like a code. I ran upstairs, but the doorknob spun uselessly in my grip, loose as a toy. Then my mom's voice called my name from the downstairs hallway. Her exact tone, her cadence. But my mom wasn't home. The mimicry was perfect. The air hummed with static energy. The floor vibrated under my sneakers, a low thrum like an old engine turning over. I shouldered the door until it gave. I sprawled into the hallway, the dogs glued to my sides, and the living room snapped back to normal. Except the window was open. The curtain billowed gently, as if stroked by an unseen hand. Minutes later, my parents walked in. I told them everything, including the word on the board. My mom went pale. She grabbed coarse salt, a bowl of water, and a stick of chalk. We all went downstairs. She drew a crooked circle on the floor, placed the water in the center, and murmured like she was bargaining. The planchette twitched. The pointer, now on A, raced across the letters. COMEBACK. Not a command, an invitation, or a threat. The cellar ceiling groaned. The dragging resumed in my parents' room. The upstairs hallway light died. We ran up. The dresser had shifted, gouging the floor. Behind it, hidden under peeling wallpaper, was a narrow crawl-space door leading into the wall's hollow. The same burnt herb stench seeped out. My dad shone his flashlight inside, carved into the wood. The same twine triangle as the cellar. 2 anchors of the same thing, linking the upper floor to the underground like a fishing line pulled taut from both ends. The neighbors started yelling outside, but not at each other. They were staring at our window. One shouted, "She's back!" The words echoed through the trees. We huddled in the living room, pretending to sip tea. The TV hissed. The screen warped. The doorbell rang. My dad answered. No one was there. Just a plastic Ouija planchette on the welcome mat. The same one from the board. I picked it up with a dish towel and locked it in a drawer. We slept in the living room with the lights on. Between dozing, I felt it pacing the edges of the room like a guard on patrol. It wasn't just fear. It was the sensation of being studied by something patient. At dawn, I dreamed of the cellar. The water in the bowl rippled without wind, and the word Mom flashed on the board like someone practicing their spelling. I woke to the curtain inflating and deflating in a rhythm that wasn't mine. Morning brought false peace. My parents left, the neighbors vanished, the dogs collapsed on the rug. The house went eerily quiet, which terrified me more than the noise ever had. That afternoon, I heard a drawer slide shut. I walked into the kitchen. The drawer was closed, but I opened it. On top of the grocery list, in handwriting that wasn't ours, a single word: tonight. I folded the paper and decided I wasn't running. When night fell, I went to my room. I left the window cracked for the heat and killed the light. My mom's voice called from the hallway, exactly how she'd sound if she wanted me to come downstairs. I almost answered, then remembered she was at my aunt's house for an early surgery. The voice said my name again, now right outside my door. Instead of turning, I threw the window wide. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and burnt sage. I spoke to the dark. I get it. You don't want the house, you want someone. The floorboard creaked as if someone had taken a step back, listening harder. The light flicked on, blazed, then died. Down the hall, my parents' door slammed. The dogs barked downstairs. I stayed seated, staring into the night, and said, "I'm not leaving." Since then, the activity has quieted, but not stopped. Lights still flicker. Marks appear on the floor. The planchette shifts sometimes, as if reminding me the game isn't over. The presence doesn't try to drive me out anymore. It studies me. This house has a history, and here history doesn't end, it circles. When the bulb crackles 3 times, I breathe and wait for the 4th click that never comes. It's our silent agreement. I acknowledge I've heard. It acknowledges it's still here. And deep in the cellar, where the twine triangle bites into the wall, something still spells my name with the patience of a hunter who knows sooner or later. Everyone answers, "Creepy. What did you think of that one? From 0 to 10, how would you rate it? Leave your opinion down in the comments." The heat in north-central Texas that summer clung to your skin like a damp wool blanket, thick and suffocating. Even the crickets had gone quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I was part of a seismic survey crew, bouncing across back roads and empty fields, mapping the earth beneath our feet. The work was monotonous, even peaceful, until that day. We were rolling down a narrow dirt road, dust kicking up behind the trucks, when one of the guys, Jake, pointed straight ahead. There, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cracked earth and gnarled mesquite trees, stood a house. Small, single-story, but with a long front porch stretching the full width of it. The windows were shattered, the wood blackened, like it had soaked up decades of sun and storms and never let them go. But it wasn't the house that made my skin crawl. It was what hung from the trees nearby. Dozens of small, desiccated animals, squirrels, birds, what looked like a cat, dangled from thin ropes, their bodies twisted and rigid, as if they'd been left there for years. The whole scene had a weight to it, a kind of wrongness so thick you didn't need words to know, this place isn't right. We inched closer. That's when we saw the walls. They were covered in symbols, no graffiti, no random scribbles. These were deliberate, ancient-looking marks, drawn in something dark and rust-colored, like dried blood. Circles, warped crosses, words in a language none of us recognized. Every window, every door had its own sigil, like they were seals holding something in. No one suggested going inside. Didn't need to. We just stood there staring while the house stared right back. Then Mark, one of our techs, pulled his camera from his bag. He always snapped photos of odd stuff we found out in the field, but this time, the click of the shutter felt like a challenge, like we'd just poked a hornet's nest. We moved on after that, but the feeling of being watched stuck to us long after we left, like something was trailing just out of sight. 2 years passed. I'd almost forgotten about it until I ran into Mark at a hardware store. We got to talking, and when the old house came up, I laughed. "Man, I still remember those symbols," I said. "Those dead animals." That's when his face went dead serious. "You gotta see this." He dug a worn photo album out of his bag and flipped to the picture he'd taken that day. I braced myself for the same chilling images burned into my memory. But the photo showed nothing. Just a run-down shack with broken windows and peeling wood. No symbols, no blood-red marks. Like they'd never existed. I asked if he'd messed up the film, if he'd accidentally shot the wrong frame. But Mark swore it was the only photo he'd taken. And that, he said, was the worst part. We started digging on our own, asked around with some of the old-timers in the area. That's when the stories started coming out. Turns out a woman had lived there decades back. Locals called her a witch, said she held rituals on moonless nights, used animal blood and those symbols to bind things that weren't meant to walk free. Others claimed they'd seen lights inside the house years after it was abandoned. Then there was the old man at the gas station who looked me dead in the eye and said, "Some marks ain't meant for everybody to see, and sometimes, not even the camera can catch what's real." That line stuck with me. Were the symbols only visible in person? Or worse, were they some kind of reaction to us being there? Some of the crew chalked it up to coincidence. Others thought the photo had been scrubbed by something that didn't want to be remembered. Me? I didn't know what to believe, but I'll never forget that heavy silence, the smell of dust and something older in the air, or the way the shadows on that porch seemed to move when you weren't looking. A few months later, we tried to find the place again. Drove the same roads, followed the same landmarks, but the path just ended. Open field. No house. No trees with carcasses. Like the whole damn place had been erased. To this day, I don't have answers. All I know is every time I think about it, my chest gets tight, and I swear I can feel it. The same prickling sensation of being watched. Like the house, or whatever was in it, still knows exactly where I am. So, what do you think really happened in that house? If you've stayed with me all the way to the end, type "witch's house" in the comments so I'll know you made it. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more stories like these, and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video and want YouTube to show you more. Oh, and there's another video right here that keeps the same eerie vibe. Click it, and let's keep going together.